I'm back, and of course I'm talking about this. You will not be surprised in the slightest when you hear about what I'm talking about today. Last week it was Rip Curl. Guess what it is this week? Bonds. Yes, the iconic Australian underwear brand have gone woke, and I think they're on their way to going broke. So the campaign that they launched this week is called Queens on Tour. I'm so confused about this campaign, so incredibly confused. I don't know if I'm dumb, if something's gone completely over my head, but I don't get it. All right, so it's an obvious collaboration between the Northern Territory government and Bonds, and it's filmed in the Northern Territory. I'm not sure if the premise is Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, because it is in the desert and it's very pride focused. But then it's also a collaboration with the Northern Territory, so I would have thought that the main aim of it would have been to showcase the beautiful vistas and the beautiful location of the Northern Territory. But instead, they seem to be focusing on the pride element a lot more, which I don't understand the connection between LGBT and the Northern Territory. Although, I don't know if you've noticed, but this is something I've really noticed and have been talking about lately, is that the Indigenous flag, the Palestinian flag, and the Pride flag all seem to be a bit of a trinity together. They're always seen together. On Australia Day, the Invasion Day marches, there was always a Pride flag, always a Palestinian flag right alongside the Indigenous flag. What is going on? They're like the Three Musketeers. You can't have one without the other two. It's so strange. And I guess it makes a little bit of sense because it is the demographic that are going to all of these pride marches that are jumping on the agenda. They're pro everything, right? If you're a minority, they're pro you. So when Palestine came up, they're the minority, and despite being well aware that if these people were to go over to Palestine, they would be dead within 1 minute of stepping off the aeroplane, for some reason they are turning a blind eye to that. As long as you're against the West, then you can be on their side. So Aboriginal, Pride, Palestine, they're all together. Anyway, back to this campaign. Yeah, so I'm super confused because I don't really understand what the point of the campaign is. I don't know if it's supposed to be a pride thing or an Indigenous thing. Either way, it's a strange campaign. It's a strange campaign because it caters to the 0.1% of people who are featured in the campaign, and it completely ignores the 99.9% of the population who are Bonds customers but aren't featured in it at all. What I can best describe it as is that a bunch of lefty marketers got into a boardroom, they sat around the table, and their only KPI from senior management was to include as many minority groups as they possibly could. So what have they gone and done? They've said, all right, pride, we tick the gender and identification box. I'm actually disappointed that they didn't feature a disabled person because that would have been another box, but that one is actually worthwhile because they are severely underrepresented. Unlike trans people who, if you look at any sort of advertising campaign over the last year, you'd think that trans people make up 50% of the population when they clearly don't. So if this campaign is truly a collaboration with the Northern Territory, I just think they could have done it so much better. If their main aim was to showcase Indigenous culture, why not go out there and speak to Indigenous elders, hear about the Dreamtime stories, talk about the beautiful environment and the history of it? There is so much history out in the Northern Territory, and they've completely disregarded all of that, instead choosing to feature drag queens and trans people, which take all of the attention away from the main goal, which supposedly is to advertise the Northern Territory. So I don't understand what they're doing with this. Is it just a case of trans people will always be at the top of the hierarchy and anyone else is below them and don't deserve to be showcased? Because that's the feeling that I'm getting. Bonds are clearly so obsessed with trans people. This is about the third or fourth campaign that Bonds has done featuring trans people. Like, they're not at all representing their customer base. And it truly does make it hard to relate to the advertising campaigns because we're not seeing ourselves in them. Yes, a trans person is wearing underwear, but It makes it impossible to work out how that would look on someone that identifies as themselves, which is 99% of the population. So when it came to this campaign, you know, they had to go to the Northern Territory, but they also had to tick the box of trans people or people who identify as not what they were born as. So it would have been a very difficult assignment to send someone up there and say, okay, you need to find an Indigenous person, but also a trans Indigenous person. Near impossible, right? But don't worry, they did it. So let's look at the campaign. All right, so we've got Stone. She identifies as a she, they. What is a she, they? Because if you identify as she, which I assume is what she was born as, although maybe it's not, because maybe she's trans and she now identifies as she. So born as a male, but now identifying as a female. But then why would you also identify as they? Because they are non-binary, are they not? So if you identify as a woman, then can you also identify as non-binary? I mean, I guess this person is. You know, that's the problem when there are no rules in society. This is what happens in the secularization of society. Humans can make their own rules, and that does not work out well, let me tell you. So Stone says she is a crystalline trophy posing as a humanoid. Okay, so she's not even human now? Okay. She's also celebrating spaces of black, spelt B-L-A-K. Not sure why they leave out the C. Queer futurism. Okay, don't know what that means. And then we have Josh, who identifies as he, him. I think that's what he was born as. He also identifies as a bisexual single father. Okay, why do we now have to put they identify as everything? Surely if you're a single father, you don't identify as a single father. You've had a child, you are now a father. You can't identify as a father. And then we have Kai, who again identifies as a she, they. Once again, I don't get it. She's an Indigenous trans model. Perfect. Booyah. They've hit the jackpot with her, ticking all the boxes. Okay, this is really lighthearted, but truly, I don't care what people identify as. If you want to do, you do what you want to do in your own time, in your life. I could not care less. Everyone has the right to live how they want to live. But I do take issue with when these big brands shove their agendas down our throats. We saw it with Bud Light. Their loyal customers just wanted to drink a beer on a Friday afternoon at the pub with their mates. And then all of a sudden, they've got this trans woman parading around like a teenage girl drinking Bud Light. And these people are saying, what are we doing? We can't relate to this brand anymore. Like, you do what you want to do, but we're not part of this life. So why are you trying to push this onto us when you know that this is not our thing? This is exactly what Bonds is doing. It's exactly what Rip Curl was doing as well. Let these people have their life, but the large majority of your customer base don't really care about it. They don't need it on posters, on TV ads, on buses. They don't need it in their faces 24/7 when they just want to go into a Bond store to support an iconic Australian brand, to buy some underwear, an in and out transaction. They don't need to be seeing trans people who, quite frankly, for some people are very confronting in their vision constantly. And look, I don't care. It doesn't particularly affect me at all. But some people truly do care. Some older people, some parents who take their children shopping and then have to answer a bunch of questions. And of course, the lefties will say, well, you just need to deal with it. This is life, deal with it. But I don't think we do, because there are so many other agendas that aren't pushed on us constantly. I mean, even take, say, a conservative value. Imagine if the Catholic Church was pushing Christianity on the entire population constantly. You know, it was on TV ads, it's on bus ads, it's on posters, it's in retail stores, Bible verses, iconography. Imagine if that was constantly around us and being pushed on us. What would all of those lefties say? They would say that this isn't fair, that we need to have our own area and our own life to live the way that we want to. And that's completely fine. That's what it means to live in a free country, but it needs to work the opposite way as well. Because right now, these big brands are trying to gaslight us into thinking that these fringe lifestyles are now the new norm, and they're just not. We see that when there is massive backlash against the brands, and this only comes out when people have been pushed to their absolute limit, when average people are pushed off advertising campaigns and replaced by trans people, and then people say, I'm done with this. This is now too much. We are silent whenever people want to live their life. We're silent when there's pride marches, when there's the Mardi Gras. Do what you want to do. People are generally very reasonable and very open. But when it's pushed onto them, they're just that you can only push so much, and people get so over it. They don't want to be guilted or told how to live their life or what to think or what to feel about things. And that's why we're seeing these massive backlashes. And what's really frustrating about this campaign in particular is Bonds is clearly doing this to tick a DEI box, to show senior management that they're doing something to push this pride agenda that has infiltrated all of these big brands at the moment. They've put very little effort into it. All they've done is created a collection of like 10 underwear pieces, which they've done 100 times before, and made a rainbow label and sewed it on, and then called it a pride collection / collaboration with the Northern Territory. Still don't understand that. And then calling themselves allies of the movement. It's so lazy, it's so transparent, and it's clearly all for optics. And this is what I hate about these big brands. They jump on bandwagons. All they want is attention. All it is for money. They truly think that these stunts are going to get them more customers and more kudos in society until there's a massive backlash, and then they're like, oops. But it's actually undermining the entire movement, because now it's just seen as shallow and so surface level. And no one takes these agendas seriously anymore. And apart from being extremely disingenuous, these campaigns are now taking opportunities away from women. We say this time and time again with the trans movement. Every time a trans woman is featured in a campaign, it means the opportunity was taken away from a biological woman. And remember back in the day when women were supposed to be the minority? When women were the ones that had to be fought for? Well, apparently now women, and for that matter, gay people, are the privileged ones. They're now right down at the bottom of the pecking order, and trans people, especially trans colored people, are right at the top. Once again, hopping on the bandwagon, pushing the latest agenda, but this has real consequences for women. And it just shows how fickle this marketing industry is, because from day to day, they will flip-flop as to which minority that they support. And then my favorite part of this whole thing is Bond's reaction. So they put up this campaign. They clearly knew the reaction that they were going to get. There was always going to be backlash. As sure as night follows day, there are hundreds of negative comments saying that they won't be buying from Bonds anymore, they're disappointed in the company, stop shoving this agenda down our throats, all very legitimate concerns. And they reply, I don't know who their social media person is, but they reply with these passive aggressive responses. Like when someone says, I won't be buying from you anymore, all they do is reply with a little wave signal like, okay, see ya, bye. They also prefaced their entire post on Instagram with just a reminder that any comments we feel are inappropriate or offensive will not be tolerated and will be removed. Okay, so they put up something very divisive, very controversial, and then they go ahead and delete any comments that they don't agree with, that don't echo and support their agenda. So they want to be diverse and inclusive, yet they'll cancel anyone who doesn't agree with them. They're complete hypocrites. This is the lefty handbook. They do this over and over again. They're right, everyone else is wrong, and no one else gets to have an opinion. So incredibly frustrating that this is how they live their lives. And These are the people who are running these big companies. And this is exactly why there is a silent majority, because people are just sick of being cancelled, of being silenced whenever they speak their opinion.